For this lightning talk, I decided to look within Module 4 at CAM usage in the US. These are complementary and alternative medicine. So I decided to look at these and their usage in the United States. I found out that out-of-pocket spending on these CAM practices represented a very large industry, actually worth nearly $34 billion within the US alone. So I kind of wanted to take a little further look at where those costs were being spent and what it could be tied to individually. So kind of looking at this made me ask the question, where and on what was most of this money being spent on in order to accumulate to being such a large amount, just being in the US alone. So kind of what areas were the consumers spending this money on? So I speculated that much of this spending would probably be attributed to office visits costs, because I know that office visit costs can be high if you don't have insurance stuff to cover it. So I thought that for these alternative medicines, that might be the biggest cost factor, and that people who were seeking out these alternative medicines would be paying a lot for these office visits. I know many specialists would have a large cost in order to visit them, but I also wondered just how these visit costs could accumulate to such a large sum, being $34 billion in the US alone in a given year. So that kind of made me think that maybe there was something out there more that I wasn't thinking of. So doing a little bit more research, I found that my belief of the cost being tied to the office visits being very large was true, but it was actually not the largest part of CAM costs within the US. It was actually only about $12 billion, representing about a third of the spending in 2007. Um, so what I found to be the largest contributor were self-care costs, which were the other two-thirds. And the biggest part of this is the NVN MNP costs, which these are non-vitamin, non-mineral natural products. I really found it astounding that costs for these types of products actually totaled to be about $15 billion, which is actually bigger than office visit costs. So yearly spending in the US for just those types of products. I also found it was interesting looking at kind of the practitioner costs when I was comparing it. They were lower than I would have actually originally expected. It showed there were some that were kind of high and some were low, with average out-of-pocket costs being around $30. But some of the lower priced ones were to visit chiropractors and osteopathic manipulation therapy areas. So I kind of figured that chiropractors might represent a large percent. So with those costs being low, that might kind of be a reason for why the spending on office visit costs weren't as high as I might have expected. But there were some still areas that where the price for office visits were high practitioner costs, and for those type of things, it was with natural therapy were some of the highest priced office visit costs. So that kind of looked a little bit more into what made up all the CAM spending within the U.S. It was kind of interesting to learn where all those costs were being spread out in such a big industry, representing such a kind of big market of spending within the U.S.